Welcome to Muddy River News this week. I'm Bob Goff. My guest is Erica Mitchell with the Hannibal Board of Public Works. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad to have this discussion, and like I said, nobody wants to pay more money for anything anymore, but the bottom line is anybody who has an electric bill, whether you are with the Hannibal Board of Public Works or you're with Ameren or you're with, co-op or whatever, the rates are going up. And your board voted to enact some rates. There was a lengthy discussion about that, and they settled for the 6% or whatever. So, how did they come to this?
How did they come to the 6%?
Yes.
So on September 15th, we had a public rate hearing and a board meeting, our regularly scheduled board meeting. We have those once a month on the third Monday at 4 o'clock if anybody ever wants to come to the meeting. But at that meeting, Hbpw staff initially proposed an 11.2% electric rate increase. And the reason we proposed that was to respond to the unprecedented cost of capacity that started 3 years ago, essentially. So we're still dealing with that 3 years later. And we initially proposed that to respond to all of that extra money that we've had to pay for purchase power. So for example, just to put it into dollars, the BPW has paid an extra $12 million in purchase power that we did not expect to have to pay. And the rate increases we've done up to this point, which have been two different ones, have only recovered $4 million of that $12 million. So we're talking about an $8 million deficit here. And so we came out and we proposed that with some data and facts and information for the board to consider. The board considered all of that, and they decided to do a 6% electric rate increase right now with the option to look at it again later and see if that's going to be needed. Another one might be needed later on.
How often by statute can the board raise the rates? Like whenever they want, or pretty much? I mean, as needed?
Yeah, it's as needed. The Hbpw is a chartered organization within the city of Hannibal, so we're a little bit different than, per se, a city department. So we have our own charter, and so we run a little bit different in regards to those rates. So presumably, I mean, you just have to have a public rate hearing a certain number of days. I think it's 15 days in advance of a rate change, and that can happen at any time depending on what the board of directors sees fit. So technically, yes, that's not what we prefer to do. No. We prefer to not do them at all if we can prevent them. But unfortunately, the last 3 years we've had no choice but to respond to the escalating market in order to try to maintain a stable financial condition, and that's really what it comes down to. And
again, I think it's a nationwide problem, and it's not something that you are. I mean, it's happening all over, like as I said, and and I don't know what the answer is because somebody has to increase capacity somehow. But you've got the problem where you've got the group that doesn't want fossil fuels, and then you've got a group that doesn't want green, and it's like we have to have something. I mean, I understand fossil fuels are a finite resource, but still, it's like we have to do something.
Yeah, and you touch on a good point regarding the issue of supply and demand. And so the way that I explain it to ratepayers is that we have a supply and demand issue. So to put it very simply, in a very complex industry, we have increasing demand, and then we have supply that's shrinking. And when you have that gap, obviously prices are going to go through the roof. And so we have a very increased demand for electricity use, whether it be electric vehicles or these AI data centers. AI is a buzzword that we're hearing a lot about this year, and they really do. Those centers take up a lot of electricity, so that increased demand, and when that supply is not meeting that demand, it's actually shrinking, and that's really going to cause a lot of pressure on the grid, and that's what we're seeing is a lot of congestion on the electric grid due to that increased demand. Yeah,
and again, I think you touched on a good point, especially when you're talking about AI. You're talking about Illinois is really jumping into quantum computing big time, and that's going to take a lot of power. And again, it's just with everything else that's going on. I know down in St. Louis they've got some major innovation projects going on down there. So again, it's always going to continue to pull out need more power, and in our world, I just don't know what the answer is unless somebody's going to decide, okay, let's fire back up the coal plants, or let's do something, nuclear. And again, every energy producer wants to pitch their own product, but then all of the other energy producers are like, well, no, you don't want to do nuclear because it might blow up. And then somebody's like, well, you don't want to do solar because the sun might be cloudy. So it's like all these competing entities can't come together, and we can't come together as a country to decide how we want to do this. But the bottom line is, at some point, we need to do something because we're going to start having blackouts or brownouts or whatever, and nobody wants that. And trust me, somebody that's in the internet business wants people to have power and be able to see the content we're producing.
Absolutely. And honestly, we have seen parts of the country that have experienced those blackouts, and particularly over the summer when you have, it's the hottest day at the hottest hour is using the most electricity. Everybody's air conditioners are running and things like that. And we have seen that. Luckily, that's not happened in Hannibal. But the last 2 years, I've issued what we call peak alerts for certain times of the day, asking the public to try to reduce their electric usage, try not to, run your washer machine, your stove, maybe keep the lights off, shut the blinds, just kind of really try to reduce how much energy you're using, as well as how often your air conditioner is running. So again, the blinds and curtains and things to kind of keep that energy in there so it's not running as often, mainly between the hours of 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. because that's when we see everyone's coming home and they're wanting to cook dinner, they're wanting to do a load of laundry, they're wanting to do whatever it may be at home that requires electricity, watch TV, things like that. And so we see a big spike in that demand during those hours, and whenever it gets really hot and we have a lot of congestion on the grid, we've had to do that a few times over the last 2 years.
And you purchase power, correct? You do not produce power.
Correct.
So you are, again, you are going to the market, you are going to try to find the best rates possible, and right now those rates are just not very good. And we are vulnerable to MISO, which is the grid operator. For a certain portion of our load, we have to purchase through them. MISO and PJM are the two, right?
Yeah, so they control ultimately the price of electricity, and their price is controlled based on a variety of things: weather conditions, available resources, and congestion on the grid. And that's the big factor right there that we're seeing, is there's a lot of congestion right now due to that increased demand that we're seeing across the nation, not just here, but everywhere. It's a problem.
And people tried to figure out ways, to produce their own power. I know, again, we've got a solar farm issue over here. We had hydro once upon a time. They wanted to try to put it at the locks and dams on the river. There have been people who've tried to come up with ideas, and again, the cost to do that, the cost to going green seems to be prohibitive in a lot of cases. But again, so for Hannibal to even sit there and consider, produce our own power, it's just not feasible.
Well, we have some things that we're trying to figure out in the works for generating electricity so that it can reduce our vulnerability on the market. But that's something that isn't going to help us right now.
No.
And it is in the works, and it will hopefully help us down the line. In fact, we believe it really will. And if we had this in place 4 years ago,
but
we would have made.
But in order to do that, where you want to go into the business of start producing your own power, there's a cost to that. You're already at a bit of a deficit with what's going on, so if you want to get in and start producing your own power, guess what? You're gonna have to have another rate increase.
And the thing is, unfortunately, we're not. The forecast doesn't look good for this capacity issue.
No, not at all.
Power, and so it's very actually kind of scary whenever you think about it and look at it. Especially for us, obviously having to and we've done all kinds of different things. Hedging ahead of time, purchasing that at a rate that we can rely on to have that locked in, so that we're not as vulnerable to what those market prices are. And we've done, I would say, everything that we can up to this point, and we still are looking at a third rate increase in 3 years. And we understand that Hannibal's not used to this.
Right.
So prior to 2023, I believe it was July of 2017 was the last time we had a rate increase.
And that's the other problem, is because politicians or government entities or what have you, they don't want to do that, and they don't. You know,
Right.
they want to like. And again, I know your board's not elected; your board's appointed, correct?
Correct,
So,
by the city council,
but
yeah.
still, you don't. You have to, and it's like when local bodies, when they say, okay, we're gonna try to cut taxes, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. If you just maintain or do slight increases, you know you're going to have to do that, because if you don't, then down the road you're going to have to drop the hammer, which is what you guys have had to do. And local taxing bodies on both sides of the river do it, and we see it all the time. And it's like, okay, I want to get so and so wants to get reelected, so we're going to like flatten our rate. Well, the next guy or gal comes along, and it's like, well, we can't do that. We've got to raise taxes because we didn't do it before. So again, kicking the can down the road is never the option.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we've looked at it every which way that we can on, you know, what could we have done to prevent this, you know, and it is just a national issue, as you have stated. And it's unfortunate that we've had to respond this way, but you know, the way that I like to look at it is, you know, what's best for the utility is what's best for the community, and the community needs these essential services. And so we need to remain financially stable. The electric fund needs to have what it needs to run and operate the infrastructure and keep the lights on and have that prompt response when there is an outage.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it that way, you know, it hopefully softens that a little bit, but it is difficult. It is not something we like to do, but we have had no choice but to respond to that escalating market. And it truly is something that's never happened before. You know, for the first time in history, we saw demand outpace supply, and that is a big problem, and we don't see it really ending anytime soon, unfortunately.
Well, and again, like you said, when a resident wants to flip on the light switch, they want the lights to come on. Bottom line, and if they don't, what's the problem? So that's the bottom line, is just keep the lights on. So.
And I can understand why people are all of a sudden are like, this has happened 3 years in a row now, what is going on? And that's what we have really tried to do, is educate and inform and tell people simplistically it's a supply and demand issue, but we can really dig down and tell you exactly where this issue is, and what we have done to mitigate our risk, and what we will continue to do, and what new things we have on the horizon that we are trying to do to further mitigate our risk for the future. But it is a very complex industry to understand. The electric industry in particular has a very high overhead cost, so it's challenging for folks to understand, and that's what we hope that we're doing, is better educating and informing so that people know what's going on.
Well, Erica, I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for your time. And again, if anybody else has any questions, they can always attend a Hbpw meeting and
Absolutely.
find out what's going on.
We welcome that, and thank you for having me. I appreciate
all right.
it.
That's all the time we have for now. I'm Bob Goff. We'll see you next week.